collaboration with the Cyprus Mail. This is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
Coming up on the programme this week, we talk to Cyprus Foreign Minister before he hands over the chairmanship of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe, and we ask for his comments on the recent recommendations on Cyprus of the UN Human Rights Committee.
We are not infallible, and we welcome recommendations because we have to know and improve ourselves. And wherever there are loopholes or defaults from our system in the country, have to be addressed to and be corrected.
We'll hear about the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development's plan to invest in the West Bank and Gaza.
I think in combination of the ingenuity of the Palestinian business people, as well as coming up with more innovative solutions, I think even in areas that are difficult to reach, I hope we can make an impact.
And still on finance, the EBRD's Deputy Director for Country Economics and Policy on prospects for Cyprus.
When it comes to cross-country comparisons of non-performing exposures, Cyprus is still off the chart in a way. It's exceptionally high.
And we'll finish on a lighter note. Speak Love is the message from the island's LGBTI community as they prepare to celebrate Gay Pride.
To be able to find a common ground, an understanding that we don't feel that we need to be against the church. This is not something that we strive for.
The 127th meeting of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe is taking place in Nicosia. The meeting began yesterday, it continues today, and earlier in the week our Foreign Minister, Ioannis Kassoulidis, briefed the press on the upcoming discussions. I asked him afterwards to give me an overview of the main topics for discussion and also whether or not these were put forward by him in his position as chairman of the committee.
The chairmanship has put as a priority the democratic security in Europe, which consists of three pillars: the rights, democratic rights of the citizens, and in particular the minorities, the immigrants. So nobody is excluded from the democracy, has to be inclusive. Second is the rule of law, and there are issues about the independence of the judiciary that they have to be protected, and the human rights and the use of the most important tool that the Council of Europe has in its possession, the European Convention for Human Rights and the European Court for Human Rights. Now, on this we have worked. For instance, on the democratic citizens, there was a ministerial meeting of the Ministers of Education in Nicosia, where the only subject was how to teach and prepare the school-age youngsters to become democratic citizens, the civil education of the pupils. We have done a number of actions, seminars, meetings for this purpose. The main objective of our presidency, the flash of our chairmanship, has been the completion of the Convention on the Protection of Cultural Heritage and of a penal code regarding the dissemination of artifacts from areas of conflict to be sold in Europe and the world. I have said to your colleagues here that in my view there would be no looting
if there were no buyers.
If there were no buyers.
So you need to cut out the demand and the supply dries up.
Curtail, let us not be, to cut out is too much to say, but there will be many people circumventing as the organized crime does and everybody else, but to curtail the sale of artifacts by people who may pretend that they didn't know. There is no such a thing in the law about you don't know from where the artifacts are coming from. And this has been approved unanimously during our presidency by the Council of Europe. Every effort was made in order to be ready to open for signature in Nicosia. 6 members have already declared their readiness after they have accomplished their internal procedures to sign, beginning with Cyprus, and there will be a ceremony Friday morning for the signature. But we firmly believe that all the member states will sign in the end, because they have all unanimously agreed about this convention. And it will be open also for non-members of the Council of Europe. And already Mexico has declared its readiness to sign, and they will sign hopefully on Friday.
Okay, so what are the main topics to be discussed then as you wrap up the chairmanship of Cyprus and hand over, I think, to the Czech Republic? From what you've just said, a lot of the programme that you initiated 6 months ago has been approved.
Yes, but the agenda, which gives the opportunity for all delegations to take the floor, and I will try, as chairmanship, that's my biggest worry, that everybody takes the floor, would be to discuss the report of the Secretary General, which covers issues of the nature that I have mentioned, immigration, terrorism, the efficiency of the Court of Human Rights, and now I may not remember everything, but so every head of delegation can take the floor and speak about all these subjects or about some of the subjects. For instance, myself in Sofia, when I took the floor, it was only about this convention on cultural protection.
You emphasised at the beginning the importance of sort of integrating all the migrants and unaccompanied children and
particularly
so on and
emphasis of this ministerial meeting would be, in the case of immigration, the protection of minors and unaccompanied children, which cannot be treated the way as adults are treated, to wait their turn and pass through the hotspots, etc. They have the right immediately for shelter,
and protection.
for protection from devious organized crime, sexual exploitation, etc., but also education. So all this, it's one thing. Another innovation is about the victims of terrorism, or the families of the victims of terrorism. And there is a protocol now that has been agreed for their provision of legal access, compensation, medical and psychiatric support, etc., etc.
So can I ask you what you make of the recent United Nations Human Rights Committee's comments about Cyprus in particular, and the inequalities that exist in the way we treat our citizens and third country nationals seeking protection here?
Well, I read all the reports on the one that you have mentioned, but that there are many others with comments, and their comments are welcomed. For instance, the Committee for the Prevention of Torture and Inhumane Treatment. We are not infallible, and we welcome recommendations, because we have to know and improve ourselves. And wherever there are loopholes or defaults from our system in the country, have to be addressed to and be corrected, and then get the next report and so forth, because a report does not just mention where things don't go well, but they also mention the progress you have achieved since the previous report. And in these reports that you are mentioning, there has been some progress. Comments about progress here and there. And then new effort, new progress the next year, etc.
Cyprus Foreign Minister Ioannis Kassoulidis, talking ahead of the meeting in Nicosia of the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe.
In collaboration with the Cyprus Mail, this is the Cyprus News Digest with Rosie Haralambous.
The biggest achievement of Crime Stoppers has been the ability of the public to be able to give information about crime anonymously.
There's no way I could have kept prostituting without the drugs. There's no way I could have had my body used like a public toilet, because that's actually what prostitution is.
And then the fourth series I started 3 days after I'd won the Oscar, so the whole of the Monarch of the Glen experience was all interplatted with the Gosford Park Oscar experience.
I was working with Ronnie James Dio, and David was going to reform Whitesnake in 2003.
Cyprus was chosen because Cyprus is a stable, peaceful and secure place.
We have to really look closely. What are we doing with children? What are we doing with adolescents? And what are we doing with adults that can help them move into a more literate situation?
The ones that I'm proudest of are the ones that were true discoveries, where we found something we didn't know existed.
During its meetings in Nicosia, the Board of Governors of the EBRD approved the engagement of the bank in the West Bank and Gaza Strip for an initial period of 5 years. The aim is to support the development of the economy with investments through a trust fund. The fund will be dispensed by the EBRD in Jordan, whose head is Heike Handgaard, and she will also be heading the expansion into Gaza and the West Bank. Joining us on the programme, along with Heike, is Hazem Shaweh, who is Governor of the Palestine Monetary Authority. That's their equivalent of a central bank. I started by asking Heike what sort of projects she would be supporting.
We aim at supporting the private sector in the Palestinian economy, so Palestinian entrepreneurs, but also foreign investors that want to invest. And I think what we are focusing on at the beginning is really looking at different sectors in renewable energy efficiency. That's a big priority, as well as smaller enterprises working with partner banks for MSME lending and energy efficiency across the economy. What we will utilize is we've been for 4 years in Jordan, and we'll utilize our experience there. So a number of the Jordanian banks are active in the West Bank, and so we will work with them to reach smaller and medium Palestinian enterprises with products such as women in business, trade facilitation, or just SME lending for their activities. And then we're doing a lot of marketing and business development going forward and looking at companies and looking at their expansion plans. So we already know that a number of the Palestinian companies are concerned about energy costs. So they want to save energy. They want to see if they can use solar energy to reduce their energy bill. And this is sort of thing that we want to support. And we're always putting our money where our mouth is. So when we are saying support, we want to lend to these companies and we want to support them with technical assistance to make the projects happen. As well as working with the government in terms of improving the business environment and the climate for companies to grow.
How challenging is it for you to be working in areas where much of the basic infrastructure no longer exists?
My experience in the lead up to the historic decision today is actually that the Palestinian business sector is very sophisticated. Entrepreneurs have found solutions to the constraints that they are facing on a day-to-day basis. They're very ingenious and innovative, and I think building on this innovation we will find new ways of, for example, you can have solar energy very decentralized, and you can just have it on your company, on your factory. So I think in combination of the ingenuity of the Palestinian business people, as well as coming up with more innovative solutions, I think even in areas that are difficult to reach, I hope we can make an impact. For example, actually mobile banking and these kind of more financial products is really quite advanced because Palestinian banks also looking at, do we operate open branches everywhere, or can we reach our customers with WhatsApp messaging, mobile banking messaging? And I think we will also use technology to support our investments and, adapt to the unique environment.
Hassan, if we come to you, what effect do you see this influx of money from the EBRD having on the way of life for the average inhabitant of the West Bank and Gaza?
I would say this will really strengthen the economy. It will be one comfort zone that the people will see that with such a big financial institution, when it's works within Palestine, in Gaza and West Bank, meaning it is giving also hope to the people that they are not left alone. The world are with them. When you talk about EBRD, meaning most of the countries are on board of the bank. So this is it's a political, it's a moral, it's a financial. This hopefully, and that's something we're looking at, that this will create more jobs, will strengthen more institutions. So it will have a really effect on ground. We'll see it in reality.
And what role will the authorities in the West Bank and Gaza be playing in the distribution of this money? How will they be able to support the effort so that it reaches as many people as possible?
Well, the different projects that is going to be that will be financed, or the joint venture with the small companies, or joint venture with banks. So I think that will, by itself, will be the way we will distribute that through the system, through the network that we have. Like, for example, banking, it's covered from in most areas in West Bank and Gaza. So that could be one tool, or one important partnership with the EBRD and the other companies or the other small companies.
Interesting that Heike mentioned energy particularly, because there's a huge problem, isn't there, with
Yes.
energy being cut off, people going without electricity and so on. Do you think that if there is a move towards even individual solar energy, that will alleviate the problem, because there'll be less demand on the grid and therefore hopefully those power cuts can happen less frequently?
I think you will see that more also in Gaza, because in Gaza, since you're aware that most of the time there is no electricity, a lot of the individuals now, they start putting solar systems and install it so they can use it during the time. Actually, personally, I live in Ramallah this time, but I installed solar energy to my house in order to support the solar energy sector.
And if I come back to you're the one who mentioned this green growth, as
Yes.
it were. So is that something, could it be that the EBRD might deal with individuals on something like this, or does it have to be a big organisation?
We aim at reaching out and expanding the green economy across all dimensions. So we will work with big developers who want to install big capacities in terms of solar. We will work with corporations that will have something on their side. So we could finance, for example, in Jordan we finance a shopping mall that has now their whole rooftop covered in solar. So it could be an individual entity. And then to reach the individual borrowers, such as, the governor of the Palestinian Monetary Authority and his house, would be via banks. So we would have a facility via banks where we have a local bank and we give them expertise and design a product so that it's easy for the individual to go to that bank and say, I want to install solar capacity on my roof, and then they have a dedicated product, a dedicated repayment scheme, and we would give technical assistance to the bank to develop the product, to help design the product for the final borrower, and we would give money to the bank to on-lend it to individual households. So I think we'll work on all these three levels to increase the green part of the economy, as we have done in Jordan, where, for example, last year we have 70% of all our investments are in the green economy.
And this was for 5 years initially, I think, that the board of the EBRD agreed. What happens at the end of those 5 years? How do you assess whether or not the money's made a difference, been used wisely, and they need more?
I think this is very similar to our regular assessment in any country that we operate. Jordan, we do country strategies, and also on a regular basis, on an annual basis, assess is what we're doing successful in Jordan or is it not? So that's very similar what we're going to plan in terms of our assessment in the West Bank and Gaza. And what we're looking at a number of things. We're looking at the qualities of transition, the way we impact on competition, on inclusion, on the green economy. So these things are measured every project, and these things are also measured every year. So we are looking at the impact on the ground across all of our qualities of transition, but we're also looking, of course, of our financial performance. So how are the repayments doing? How is the financial return of these investments doing? So I think these things are evaluated on a regular basis, and this will be just also shared with our board of directors that can then, decide to continue with new investments after the 5 years when we do a bit of a comprehensive assessment of this. But I think we're looking both more the importance is the impact on the ground, but then also on the financial return.
Well, it's great news for the beleaguered people of Gaza and the West Bank. The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD, approved the engagement of the bank in those areas through a trust fund, which will run for an initial period of 5 years.
Keep up to date with events in Cyprus and around the world with the Cyprus News Digest.
Staying with the EBRD, Peter Sanfi is Deputy Director, Country Economics and Policy, and he gave a briefing on Cyprus in which, although he congratulated the country for its growth over the last couple of years, he did say it was starting to slow down and suggested there were things that could still be done. I spoke to him after his briefing, and I asked him why he thought the growth was slowing.
So I think last year was indeed an exceptionally good year, I think, and a testament, I guess, to the good policies that have been in place for several years now. Our forecast for this year is, it's slightly below last year, 2.5 versus 2.8. I think one thing to keep in mind, last year there was an exceptional tourism performance. I think tourism looks to me to be pretty much at capacity now, so it's going to be very hard to, with that high base effect, to have an increase of that type again. I know there are plans to expand the tourism industry, to make the quality better, to extend the season, but those kind of things take time. So in the short term, I think that's going to be difficult to do. The other thing, as I mentioned, this is still a highly indebted economy. So on the fiscal side, public debt is still above 100% of GDP. It's very encouraging that the government is recording primary surpluses for several years, and even a small general government surplus last year. But obviously that will have to continue in order to bring the debt levels down. And at the private level, again, there's still a lot of overhang of debt, and particularly in the corporate sector, a lot of that is non-performing. When it comes to cross-country comparisons of non-performing exposures, Cyprus is still off the chart in a way. It's exceptionally high. That's a complex issue that will take time to bring down, but it is a headwind to growth in the short term.
It is something, though, that we've known we need to deal with for some considerable time. Are we dealing with it too slowly? Is there a way to speed it up?
It's a very complex issue. I would hesitate to point the finger at anyone, but on the other hand, I do, and with my colleagues at the EBRD, we do at all times emphasise the urgency of dealing with this problem. That NPLs, they are an outcome of bad economic policies and bad economic performance. They will naturally come down over time as the economy improves, but the causation goes the other way as well. If you tackle NPLs, you're freeing up management time in banks and corporates to then go on and look for new clients and to stimulate economic growth in the future. So I think we are very keen to see this process continuing and accelerating, and we're going to do what we can to help that.
Now, as far as I'm aware, the EBRD was involved to some extent in the privatisation of Limassol Port. We seem to have rather lost our way on the possible privatisation of the telecommunications and energy sectors.
Yeah.
Is that going to have an impact, not only, do you think, on the overall economy of the island, but also on the view of organisations like the EBRD?
You've pointed to an area that was a little bit disappointing, an area of the original programme where we expected to see more progress than we actually saw. I understand the political sensitivities of privatising there. I understand it's difficult, and we are now entering a pre-election phase, so there may be further delays. All I would say, though, is that a good privatisation in telecoms, in energy sector and in others does bring long-term benefits to ordinary people in a country, because it brings in fresh investment, it brings in new skills and processes. It does, if it's well designed, it enhances competition, and through competition you get lower prices for the end users of these services. So it's not that these privatizations are absolutely essential and the economy will collapse without it, absolutely not. But they would, if they're properly done, strengthen the economic performance and bring benefits.
Peter Sanfi, Deputy Director, Country Economics and Policy at the EBRD.
You can subscribe to the Cyprus News Digest on iTunes for free and get the program downloaded to your phone or tablet so you can listen anytime, anywhere.
Earlier this week, the LGBT community in Cyprus held a press conference to announce the events that will culminate on the 28th of May with the annual Pride March. Kostas Gavrielidis is president of Accept LGBT Cyprus, and he told me what's coming up.
So we have a play that was written specifically for the Cyprus Pride. It's directed by Marios Metis, and it was written by Christiana Artemiou. This is called Juliet and Juliet. It's in Greek, and then we have two days specifically for this. The artists that play the actors are Poppy Abraham, Androula Herakleos, Christina Konstantinou, Polixeni Sava, and Myrsini Christodoulou. The storyline is about women who fell in love with women. We're quite excited about that. We have a couple of discussions. Some of them have to do with rhetoric. So there is one very important one, I think, specifically for the church rhetoric and homosexuality. We would like to see how the church actually portrays some of its messages out to the people regarding homosexuality. What we want is to be able to find a common ground, an understanding that we don't feel that we need to be against the church. This is not something that we strive for. We believe that being religious and it's a human right, as it should be a human right for somebody to be respected for who they are. LGBTI specifically. So we have a discussion regarding that. We have in Limassol an event for parents with Elita Michailidou. We are going to discuss, she's going to be discussing with three of our parents in our Parents of LGBTI group that we have in Accept. She's going to be discussing how it is to raise an LGBTI child. We have a couple of events as musical events, but obviously the main thing is next weekend, which we are going to be at the Municipal Garden on Saturday for the Pride concert on the 27th. Evridiki is going to be there, Fivos Delivorias is going to be there, Iroi is going to be there, a number of Greek and Cypriot artists, and that will be followed by an event with a drag show that's coming from Holland specifically for that at Andonakis Bar in Nicosia. Then we have the big march on the 28th, which we are quite excited about. This is going to be the fourth year that we're having the event, only the fourth year, but it's been very well received by the Cypriot public, and we were all able to show how the public is more forward than sometimes we wanted to think. And we're going to have Hovik there from the Eurovision. He's singing, plus an event from a drag show again from Holland. We're very much looking forward to it.
Kostas Gavrielidis, President of Accept LGBT Cyprus. And you can find the details of all those events if you look for them on Facebook at Accept LGBT Cyprus. They've also got a website, www.acceptcy.org. Well, that about wraps up this edition of the Cyprus News Digest. Many thanks for your company. Hope you'll join me next week. Till we meet again, take care and God bless. Bye-bye now.